networking. And this will be a recorded event, and we will post this for those that are unable to attend. So to all of the ARC Beavers, welcome back. And welcome to the Fall 2001 Convocation. We are excited to be with you this morning. We hope we are offering you a program that is beneficial, that will be helpful, and insight will help inform your work throughout the semester. It has been a long journey through this academic year, and certainly exciting time for all of us. Also a very challenging time. So yes, hi Beavers, welcome back. Good morning, and boy, have we missed you over the summer session for those of you that have been away. We hope that you have enjoyed your families. We hope that you have been remaining healthy and taking care of your community, which is what we do at American River College, is come together as community. As such, it's important for us to acknowledge the land by which we occupy, and our commitment to our Indigenous communities around that acknowledgement. I've had the opportunity since our arrival to work with Dr. Valle, and we have developed a video. And this is going to formalize American River College's commitment to our Indigenous communities. And such an important time, given the discoveries in Canada earlier this year, given the pandemic's impact on our tribal communities. We are thrilled to make this acknowledgement. We are honored to be able to serve our students and our community on this land. And I would like to take this time to turn it over to Dr. Vyets to provide our land statement. Thank you so much.
Thank you, President Dixon. At this time, I want to say Lios Chaniabu in Halaim Mamatame ito kechem alea nuemia ketwotui. It is important for me to use my language this morning to greet you in order to bring the voices of my ancestors, to summon their presence, to honor their great struggles, sacrifices, and their survival, and to give them space in my heart to then share them with you. Languages have a purpose and a story. There are values embedded about how to caretake the land, how to caretake each other, and how to nourish our spirits. Everyone has an indigenous language. Your language of lineage ties you to a sacred geography. The Native American Resource Center at ARC believes in language diversity and language sovereignty for all indigenous peoples in all parts of the world. The wellness of the land is connected to the wellness of place-based languages. Ecocide, linguicide, and genocide walk hand in hand. I appreciate, thank you, Melanie, that you brought to the forefront those important issues that you mentioned. We encourage everyone to gain knowledge and insight about the legacy of the impacts of systemic efforts to strip Native families of their children. At this point, I'm going to share a slide. About systemic efforts to strip Native families of their children through the boarding school system in the United States that lasted until 1978, until the passage of the Indian Child Welfare Act, which provided Native families rights to their children. To this day, there are unmarked and unrecognized mass graves of thousands of Native children that surround the boarding schools that dot the United States. Repatriation efforts are happening in the present day, even in the last few months, as tribes assert their rights to the remains of their children. As I read the land statement this morning, I ask that you reflect who lived and walked here, whose relatives are buried beneath our campus, whose tools worked the earth, guided the creek, planted the oaks we enjoy, harvested the acorns, and shaped the landscape that we see. How do local Native youth perceive our campus, our faculty, our programs, our course material? And regardless of your affinity group or individual identification or group history, how do we create a relationship with the surviving family members of the land? So we acknowledge the land today, which we occupy as the traditional home of the Nisenan, Maidu, and Miwok tribal nations. These sovereign people have been the caretakers of this land since time immemorial. Despite centuries of genocide and occupation, the Nisenan, Maidu, and Miwok continue as vibrant and resilient tribes and bands, both federally recognized and unrecognized. We take this opportunity to acknowledge the generations that have gone before, as well as the present day Nisenan, Maidu, and Miwok people. Thank you. Joko Utesia.
I want to thank you for those words, Jesus, and more importantly, our sheer commitment and sentiment around supporting our communities. It's not about talking about what it is that we want to do to come into community, to fulfill our commitment to equity, social justice, and inclusion, we must be present. We must lean in. We must acknowledge, and we must see each other. And so today, hopefully through the sharing that we provide, the discussions that we engage, the facilitation that happens in our keynote, that we will understand the value of engagement, the value of identifying and being inclusive, not only in our service delivery, but in our pedagogical practices and as human beings engaging in the ARC community. So thank you so much. We do honor the land by which we occupy, and I feel so very fortunate to be the president of American River College that has maintained that commitment. Thank you for your leadership, Jesus. You've been phenomenal, and there are a lot of partnerships that are getting underway as it relates to supporting our Indigenous community. And one of those is the racial categories. Our Indigenous students are categorized in a way that is not natural to their identity. And this is our tribal categories, our tribal nations. And so as we begin to look at our data and we begin to lean into our commitment, we will be making the adjustments and we will represent our tribal communities in a way that is authentic to them. And so I am proud for the advocacy that you have no doubt and unapologetically displayed, Jesus, along with many of those that have participated in the allyship work that is occurring at American River College. So thank you for your leadership, thank you for your commitment, and thank you for helping us broker partnerships with our tribal communities in order to make good on what it is that we say to be true about us: inclusion, social justice, and our commitment completely to closing opportunity gaps for our students. So thank you so much. With that being said, I have the great luxury of serving as your college president. And it has been a wild ride since my arrival in January. And again, I would reiterate, I can think of no other group of people that I would like to take this ride with to address these complex issues that we will all face together. And so I noticed that you all have seen that the chat is engaged, and I would ask that you continue to engage your colleagues in that space throughout the program today. Given that we can't be in person and feel that buzz, that energy, the opportunity to connect in ways in which I'm sure you, like I, yearn for on a daily basis. Oh, yeah, it's got the time. We also have a Q&A put in place, and that Q&A is set up for you all to be able to engage and ask questions throughout the day, with the recognition that we will begin to respond to those. And for those that we don't, as always, we will respond to those. So on our website, where we have a continued conversation about Beavers building together, we will continue to track our conversations, the questions being posed by our community, and responding. We will also continue to hold listening sessions throughout this academic year to address many of the questions that will no doubt arise as information changes, as our direction potentially changes. So with that being said, I want to welcome all of you again to the Fall 2021 Convocation. And as your president, Melanie Dixon, I identify as she and her. And I think it's important for all of us to recognize the value of sharing that identity as a mechanism for being inclusive. So I say to you all this morning, welcome. And I think the most important welcome for you all is from our college leaders. We have a phenomenal group of leaders as our Senate presidents. And I am very fortunate to engage with all of these individuals very personally. I've come to learn that they're not only highly competent, but they're very passionate about the work and the advocacy for their constituency groups that they serve. But most importantly, they are staunch advocates for American River College, and I am honored to work alongside of them, and I am honored to advance the issues and the concerns and the interests of each of the constituency groups by which they serve. So with that, it is my pleasure to offer to you our Academic Senate President, Elisa Shub, to provide a welcome. Thank you so much, Elisa.
Thank you, Melanie. Good morning, fellow educators. Welcome, everyone. My name is Elisa Shub, and I use the she or they pronouns. I am honored to be serving one more year as your Academic Senate President. And to keep this address short, I made a list of words that I wanted to use in this address to you today. These words are excited, proud, humbled, concerned, but hopeful, anxious, tired, but also refreshed, renewed, and eager. And mostly just very happy to be able to share this virtual space with you today. All of us have been through so much together since we physically left campus back in March 2020. We've also done so much. I don't even begin to have a list for all that we've been through and all that we've done. The one thing that's certain is that together we have been doing great things. So from wherever you are, whatever you are doing to prepare for the start of this semester, please know that we are together and that we are all doing great things. I'm so honored to be working with such an amazing group of colleagues, friends, and dedicated educators. So welcome fall 2021. Let's go meet our new students and continue to do great things. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our incoming Classified Senate President, Kristen Farlow.
Thank you so much. Well, hello and good morning again to all. Welcome to fall semester. I'm Kristen Farlow, and I have the honor to serve as your new Classified Senate President. And first off, I want to thank you all for being here today, for listening in, for watching, for just taking the time to participate in this exciting time for American River College. I've only been at ARC for probably 5 years, coming up in January. I feel like I've been able to connect with many of you, maybe just in this past year and a half in our remote world, but also in person. So a little bit about me. Some of you might have known me before. I did serve the office of the Vice President of Student Services. But like many of my fellow classified professionals, I too have transitioned over the last year or so. And I'm currently one of the interim home base coaches serving the language and people home base as part of our pathway communities. So I do want to welcome you to this fall semester, and I hope I can infuse just a little bit of encouragement today so that we are ready to start fresh for this fall. But with that, I want to take one brief moment to just say thank you. I want to thank each and every one of you for all that you do, everyone in the ARC family, the work that has gone into making this last year and a half or so happen and happen successfully. Specifically, I want to thank my fellow classified professionals today for all your dedication and your hard work. I know that many of us have taken on new duties, even more than one job worth, new projects, and for some of us, that's really invigorating. But also, it can be tiring. I know many of us are experiencing burnout, and I just want you to know I see you and I hear you, and I thank you for your hard work. As classified professionals, I think we know by now that we really have each other's back, but you should also know that our administrators and our faculty colleagues also know the work that we do, and we all as ARC family have each other's back. So whether you are leading a workshop or you're processing paperwork, you're scheduling classes, cleaning the campus, prepping our technology, maybe you're meeting with students already one-on-one, you are carrying the student success on your shoulders, and I thank you. ARC thanks you. I know that we are ready, and I know that it's go time, and I know that we as classified professionals will rise up this semester. We will summon and give our energy and our gifts and our talents, because I know just as I see you, you see our students. You connect with them, you serve them, and you continue to push forward for their success. I truly look forward to meeting more of you this semester, and I am excited for the work that we will accomplish together as classified professionals and for all of the work we will do as an ARC family. I say family because this is what we are, truly. Relationships are the heart of ARC. And the largest part of our family is, of course, our students. So with that said, I have the privilege of passing the mic now to our Associated Student Body President, Stacy Burrows.
You. Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you for inviting me to share in today's events. To tell you a little about myself, I'm an interdisciplinary STEM student, and my pronouns are they, them. I grew up on an extended family farm in a rural community outside of Fresno, where I was an early graduate from high school just over 20 years ago. I studied history at CSU Sacramento more than 10 years ago. Having committed to earning a degree while remaining debt-free, I chose to defer my studies due to the financial crisis of 2008 and did not return to higher ed until after I became a homeowner. Understanding many students would be faced with similar financial planning decisions in the wake of the pandemic motivated me to join student government last year, where I was then encouraged to run for this office by my predecessor. Working with and for students has defined my experience at ARC, where I have served as president of 4 student organizations and worked as a member of the classified staff in 3 departments, providing instructional assistance in the biology lab, mentoring tutors with Beacon in the LRC, and assisting administration of a student outreach pilot program. This institution has drastically changed my understanding of the interconnections between communities and the fabric of the universe. On behalf of all ARC students, thank you for everything you as staff and faculty do to facilitate our learning and our success. American River is an authentic community space, both on campus and in the virtual world, where so many of us not only take classes, but also work, forge friendships, and develop relationships with mentors who help shape our futures. In the interest of further supporting student success in a rapidly changing world, I would like to share 3 impactful things each of us can do this year. First, engage students about their fundamental capacity for both leadership and personal sovereignty through tutoring, participation in student organizations, and sincere encouragement to share their thoughts, ideas, and feedback. Second, affirm students' belonging in classrooms, on campus, in clubs, and across disciplines. It is vitally important to acknowledge all students for who they are and where they are in their journeys. Understanding each student embodies a complex personal truth, replete with both the richness and the challenges of their lived experiences. Our unity is not found in the simplicity of consensus, but in the embrace of diversity and the willingness to defer judgment against those who differ from us. Third, bring collaborative projects and ideas for inclusivity to Student Senate and Student Design Team to ensure that student voice is part of the implementation process. Finally, I would like to encourage you to witness students and also to reflect on the nature of student triumph. During my time studying and working at ARC, I have witnessed an artist who struggled with algebra work to become a calculus tutor and engineering major with a full ride scholarship for transfer. A club officer who a few weeks after being appointed to Student Senate's executive board became a statewide advocate for LGBTQIA2S+ and disability rights. A group of science majors who like to meet after work for pizza become a payload design team that successfully launched their project from a NASA base. More recently, I have witnessed pre-nursing students wrap their shifts as emergency room technicians at our local hospitals amid a global pandemic to then dial in for Zoom tutoring while preparing dinner for their families. Courage and determination manifest in many forms, and in ordinary circumstances, especially, our ordinary accomplishments become transformative as extraordinary deeds. I am honored to serve our remarkable student community at ARC, and I wish all of you a compelling and fulfilling year ahead. Thank you.
My apologies. Thank you so much. I want to thank all of our Senate leaders for their kind words and their welcoming messages. They are all phenomenal in their own right, advocating for the interests of the constituencies in the college, and most importantly, our students. As it relates to Stacy's words, I cannot agree more, and I couldn't say it any better. Our students' voices are so imperative to our new design, our new direction, our pedagogical practices, our service delivery, our commitments as a community. I thank every single one of you for showing up every day in spite of everything that is transpiring and maintaining that commitment to our students. Sometimes not being the voice of interest in the room, sometimes being the squeaky wheel, sometimes being the assertive voice that advocates when our students' voices have been marginalized, suppressed, or ignored. I am happy to say that one of my many interests in coming into American River College and working with all of you is to elevate voices of the marginalized, to ensure that we are collectively thinking through the complex issues as a college, making sure that every perspective is being considered before we arrive at a decision and move in a direction when time permits. So I appreciate Stacy, who serves on the new American River College student design team that will help inform not only our processes and our practices, but also how it is that we develop regulations, how it is that we conduct ourselves, how it is that we think about this work to ensure that we are meeting the needs not only of our students, but the students that are coming behind them in our K through 12s, for the adult learners that will return and need retooling. I am thrilled to be at a college where I know that commitment is live and well, and innovation is the spirit by which we draw from. And so thank you to all of our Senate leaders, not only for your advocacy and your leadership, but for your humanity and your compassion and your unwavering commitment to equity and student success. Thank you so much. With that being said, there is a lot to celebrate. There is a lot to be happy about in spite of many of the things that we are experiencing. I want to acknowledge that although we are coming back together, and today is, in my mind, a celebratory moment, not only to appreciate and welcome you back, but to help you all understand the great impact that you have on students' lives. Sometimes in the most small ways, there's such an impact that is a ripple. As you talked, as Stacy talked and she shared the experiences of students, it is in the walls of ARC, within the Zoom spaces now of ARC, by which our students are transformed. And that transformation occurs with you. And I thank you for that. And I think it's a testament to the great work you're doing in spite of the enormous challenges. So with that, as a community and a family that wants to see each other and embrace each other, I certainly don't feel happy about pulling up a screen with some slides. But I think it's important for us to be able to share some of the other things that are taking place at our college in a way that is representative. We've had a lot of change, and we've been separated from our communities in ways that have been hurtful, in ways that have been impactful. And I want to be able to share and acknowledge some of the things that have occurred since we've been away from campus. I'm not the best technological driver, so I think as you all have been with me thus far in this particular role, I appreciate all of your grace and patience and support. So a part of the acknowledgements that we have is also recognizing that we brought on new members of our team. We've gone through a hiring process that has been no doubt challenging in the midst of our ability to be able to support our colleges at the most impactful time. We find ourselves in a situation where we are not able to bring on the employees that we need. And in that particular process, it created a challenge for us, right? A challenge that meant that there were people that were asked and expected to do more. People that were asked and expected to do different things as it relates to taking on new roles, redeployments. As we have our classified professionals joining us today, the redeployments are a very impactful and disruptive process, but it was one that they were willing to do and engage in and still are in order to support our community. So I do want to acknowledge the new employees that we have in our community since we started in spring, because I think it's important for them not to only feel the power of American River College and the spirit that we have to persevere and maintain our flagship persona, but also to understand that they have a network. And coming into this particular role in a remote environment, that's a scary prospect. It's very challenging to develop the relationships that are necessary in this time where trust is so essential. And so for me, it's really critical that we highlight to these individuals that we are here, we are a family, and even in this remote space, we're available to provide support and encouragement. So I'd like to start with one of our new employees, and that is Marie Ann Lexkaby, and she is in our nursing department. And I had an opportunity to meet this individual as they went through our process, and they are a phenomenal addition to our team. So I would ask, as I highlight our new hires, that you all take to chat and welcome these new members of our family that will be starting at a very challenging time. Another one of our new employees is Ann Lee, and Ann is over in our engineering area, and she serves as a long-term temp, and I think it's important to see the value of long-term temps, our adjuncts, our temporary classified, and others that aren't necessarily highlighted, but certainly add to the backbone of our institutions to serve students. So I want to congratulate and welcome you. We also have Ingrid Marr that joined our team as a certified nurse assistant. And essentially, I had an opportunity to meet this individual too. A phenomenal talent, going to bring some great ideas to the nursing department and certainly a team player. So we welcome you, Ingrid, to the ARC family. Gabe Ramos is a part of our public safety training center, a new addition to our team at a time that's so critical when we're thinking about policing, right? When we're thinking about how do we situate ourselves and bring the right tools to the right situation. And so we welcome you, Gabe, and we know that your work is cut out for you and your team, but we appreciate you and your commitment to developing the new workforce in our policing field. And then we have Stacy Sanborn, who also is joining our nursing team. Phenomenal, high energy, great skill, great talent, and certainly also a team player. Comes with the pediatric background, which is a skill that is so essential. And so we welcome you, Stacy, and we hope that you enjoy the program today. We've also brought on some new managers, some of them from our internal team and some of them from an external team. And so Caressa Gore is one of our faculty members taking on our McClellan Center. Difficult role, difficult time, phenomenal work that she has done thus far in that role. And I want to thank her for her leadership. I want to thank many of the others at the center, Karen, for their leadership in making sure that our students are supported and making sure that our students are connected and have the resources to be successful in their training programs. We recently brought on an interim dean of student engagement and completion, and this is a new role of its kind, and it's really connecting our engagement work around our DI populations and equity efforts with our research work and our success goals. And so Eric Handy is a new member of our team that will take leadership in our Unite Center. And I'll describe a little bit more about what's transpiring in that center later on in the program, but we are thrilled to have Eric on board with his extensive background and work in equity. And we welcome you, Eric, and we hope you enjoy today's program as well. Narain is such a phenomenal individual and not new to our community, has done phenomenal work within our science and engineering areas and continues to do that. Having worked with one of the most incredible deans, Rena Royer, who is retiring, I see so much of the influence and the mentorship that has been provided in the work that he brings forward and how he leads that area. So we welcome you and really thrilled to have you in that particular role. We also have folks that have transitioned into new roles. And as a part of our hiring freeze, there's been many movements, and these movements are necessary to build capacity. And we'll talk about that later on today as well. So when we talk about some of our members in our custodial team, some of the unsung heroes at our colleges that are making sure that our facilities are maintained while we are away and certainly as we return. Jose Luis Alfaro is a member of our team that transitioned into a custodial role, and we appreciate you for the work that you do in that particular role. Connie Ayala has served in a critical capacity with our strong workforce area and has since transitioned over to our counseling department. Will be serving as our articulation officer, and as you all know, a really critical role in making sure that our students have strong pathways to our four-year institutions. So Connie, we congratulate you on that new role. We have Nisha Beckhorn, who has served in many capacities for our college. Where there is a need, she is willing to serve, and we appreciate her leadership. Now serving our counseling department and working with that team in very innovative ways. Their department chair in that particular area, Raina Moore, has done a phenomenal job in engaging with our dean and our supervisor and our counselors to make sure that the needs of counseling is being met in this remote environment, and thus the needs of our students. So I thank you, Nisha, and your chair, and congratulate you in assuming that new role. Dr. Booth has transitioned into a role and has been at our college for many years, transforming all the things that he has been involved in. A great spirit, a great leader, and we want to thank him for taking on the portfolio of strong workforce, which is an area where we will need to build capacity and continue to gain growth. So congratulations to you, Dr. Booth, in that new role. Very great choice. Another transition that we have is John McCormick. What a phenomenal human being John is, and what incredible work John does, not only for our college, but for all of the individuals that he touches. He is just a memorable, competent, and friendly guy. And I'm so glad that he's assumed this role. Very well deserved, and congratulations, John. We have Julia Miller, who is taking on a Clerk 3 role, and we appreciate that in operations. The need is great in that particular area, and the talent is deep. And so, Julia, we congratulate you in that role, and thank you so much for everything that you and your team do to support our college. Jazzy Maganzo Murphy has done phenomenal work at American River College as it relates to our first-year experience program, and also our home bases, our pathway communities, in collaboration with our instructional colleagues in developing and leveraging the maps, the hard work of our faculty for developing maps and actualizing that for a student to be able to make a determination around their pathway. It truly is our guided pathways efforts brought to life, and that leadership that Jazzy has brought is a part of that effort. And so we thank you and congratulate you, and it's well deserved. We also have Kathy Sorensen, and Kathy Sorensen has been a part of the district for quite some time, but came over to ARC in an interim capacity and has done a phenomenal job. Has since assumed the permanent responsibility of behavioral and social sciences, and a phenomenal individual that's a great listener and will continue to advance the efforts of those areas. And so congratulations, Kathy, and we're happy to have you in that particular role. And when I think about someone who has had a challenging gig, right? Kat Sullivan Torres in our athletics area and serving as our interim dean has done a phenomenal job, not only adapting to the challenges that all of us are impacted by in the college as it relates to the pandemic, but also as it relates to various regulatory bodies. So when we think about much of the advocacy that takes place at Kat's level, it has been phenomenal. And I am appreciative for the leadership, not only that, but the partnership that we have had over this year. And I look forward to meeting with the athletics team later on this afternoon. And then finally, and I am certainly enthusiastic about Ku Vang assuming the permanent Vice President of Administrative Services on the President's executive team. It was a hire that I was able to make as your new president, and I couldn't be more impressed, not only with the skills of Ku, but I think also just her passion and commitment to solving problems. At a time where problems are great, it is wonderful to be able to lean on someone like Ku Vang to help us move through and make fiscal decisions that allow us to be stronger and sustain our efforts. So I want to thank you. I'd like to take a moment to remove this presentation and then just chat it up in the chat box by sharing our appreciation, sharing our gratitude, and welcoming our new employees and those that have made transitions into their new roles over this last year at a very difficult time. And I think it's a testament to their leadership. So thank you all, and congratulations to all of you. And we look forward to seeing you in your new roles as we return to ground. So with that being said, I wanted to transition just slightly. We talk about being family, and no doubt we are. We also talk about the connection and the engagement that's so imperative for us to be successful. And that success is incumbent upon all of us, right? The engagement is required by all of us to be successful as a college. We are a community college for a reason. It's because the community is what allows us to thrive. And so when I think about that, I think about those that have contributed their time, their efforts, their energy, their passion, their advocacy, and their expertise to our college community. And as we have passed through this last year, we've had 62 employees retire. Those employees retired as a result of their ending their careers naturally. Some of them have retired based on the environment and it just not being an environment that is conducive. But most importantly, many of those that have retired with a deep love for American River College and their colleagues. And we lost an opportunity to be able to send them off with love, care, and appreciation. For those of you that are new to our community, we typically have an opportunity to celebrate our retirees and their years of service on ground, being able to break bread with them, being able to share our memories with them, kind words, appreciation, gratitude, and sometimes even jokes and funny stories based on our history together. We've lost that in this space. And that loss is reflective of a loss of engagement in ways that feed us professionally and personally. And so for me, it's really important for us to acknowledge our retirees in a way that allows them to feel the love, to feel the gratitude, to feel the appreciation. And so what I would ask of all of you is to put some kind remarks in the chat for those that have retired, to be able to say that we appreciate you. My goal will be able to find a public place to be able to show this gratitude. And when we touch down on the ground, to be able to invite our previous retirees back to be acknowledged in person, to feel the love and the energy and the gratitude that we have for them directly. So with that being said, thank you so much for all of our retirees. I think of the Dan Crumps, I think of the Marsha Reskys, I think of the Jerry Marshalls, I think of so many that have done a phenomenal job and have been so committed and have been phenomenal colleagues and partners, not only at American River College, but also within our districts and within our communities. So thank you so much to all of our retirees for everything they've done. We hope that they remain engaged with the college. We hope to be able to leverage their skills, their knowledge, their passion as now alums and community members that still want to see American River College thrive in this environment. So with that being said, I think one of the things that I'm excited about as we talk about elevating voice, engagement, and seeing one another is this opportunity to be able to celebrate employees that aren't necessarily provided the recognition. And so in history, the last 10 years of American River College, there has been an award provided to our adjuncts. And this particular award was named after a former adjunct that has since retired at our particular college. And so I'd like to share a little bit about this particular award and more importantly, the namesake of the award. And then I would like to turn over the floor to our particular scholarship, our namesake of the award, and be able to share that out with the recipient. So Ken, I see you here today, and as someone who was encouraged by one of our current deans, Gary Aguilar. Gary encouraged you as a faculty member who served as an adjunct to serve as a member on the Senate, to come to the academic Senate table, to share your ideas, to be exposed. And based on our interaction, you shared with me that you weren't really aware that that was something that adjuncts could do. And I think that highlights, right, the voice that needs to be elevated. When we talk about our adjuncts and their roles and their contributions, it's not only in the classroom, right? It's not only to support a program, but it's also within our planning and our leadership ranks to be able to help shape us in a way that allows us to progress as a college. And with this particular award, it really highlights that. It highlights the experience of an adjunct that didn't really know their role within the institution as it relates to the leadership, and being connected to that by another leader, our very own Gary Aguilar, who not only is a phenomenal leader, a phenomenal human being, and a good friend of mine. So with that being said, Ken has put forth, read some articles, had been exposed to other colleges that were doing innovative things to be able to acknowledge and celebrate adjunct professionals and faculty members at their particular institutions. That was inspiring to Ken. So not only was the light switch turned on to be able to engage in a meaningful way in the college as an adjunct, but then that inspired him to bring forward ideas on how you could then continue to elevate and represent adjuncts in a meaningful way. And with that was birthed 10 years ago, the Ken Dilbert Award. Upon his retirement, this award was created and has been provided and extended to phenomenal adjuncts at American River College since then. And this year is no different. The only difference is instead of us doing this in person, we are doing this in the Zoom space. So with that, today we have the great honor of having Ken with us to acknowledge and award the Adjunct of the Year Award for 2021. So with that being said, Ken, I would like to offer you the opportunity to address our attendees today.
The Ken Dilbert Adjunct of the Year Award gives us the opportunity to recognize a part-time faculty member for their outstanding work and achievement during their career at American River College. Thanks to the ARC Foundation, we are also able to present a $1,000 honorarium to the winner. This year's recipient is described by colleagues as, quote, hardworking, always welcoming, open, and unquote. For the past 18 years at American River College, she has strived to help people be their best. She learns something new, she then shares that knowledge with colleagues and has been essential in helping her department transition their courses online over this past year. In addition to teaching in American River College Automotive Department, the recipient developed, organized, and direct activities for staff to attend professional development and continuing education. She also helps plan the annual award for the outstanding students in the automotive program. Cheryl is always willing to help people meet their goals in life. Please join with me in congratulating Cheryl Tsushima as the 2020-2021 Adjunct of the Year.
Woo!
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ken. And more importantly, congratulations, Cheryl. Please, college community, let's get chat on fire and congratulating Cheryl for her contribution, her unwavering commitment to American River College, her department, and our phenomenal students. Cheryl, we recognize that you did not want to take a space on the panel, and we respect that, but also just want to share our gratitude with you for the phenomenal work you do and a much well-deserved award. Not only for the work that you do personally, but represents symbolically the work that our adjuncts collectively do to support our college and the greatness that they bring, the creativity and commitment to our students that you all bring. So with that, Ken, I would like to thank you not only for acknowledging such a great talent at American River College, but also for your service to American River College as a former adjunct, but also as an alum. We thank you so much, and thank you for joining us today and providing Cheryl with this wonderful award.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. I want to thank you again for your great work, Cheryl, and I congratulate you. We look forward to providing you with an acknowledgement when we see you, and I look forward to giving you a big hug when I see you of appreciation. Keep doing the great work. I hope that your work inspires others to reach for greatness and continue to perform at high levels in spite of the challenges. And I think that's a testament to who you are and what you bring to American River College. So thank you so much. And thank you to the community for sharing the love in the chat for Cheryl and Ken in the phenomenal contributions that they provide. So I want to acknowledge some of the accomplishments, because at this particular time, I think it's difficult to see some of the things that we have been able to accomplish over this last year. And for me, it's important to have continuity between what happened in spring and where we are right now. And so one of the things that I've offered up to this community when I arrived in January as your new college president was really this theme of hope, healing, and handling business. And for some individuals, that theme resonated. For others, it felt a little corny. For others, it felt a little misplaced with what it is that we were trying to tackle, and that not necessarily being the priority that we have. What I know in working with American River College thus far is that we're never going to find an outcome, a position, a perspective that meets the needs of our whole entire community, because we're huge. But what I commit to you is that I'm going to make every effort to get us as close to a shared perspective, a common goal, a winning perspective for all of us. And that means being a really good listener. That means leaning in and having really hard conversations. And it also means acknowledging the phenomenal work taking place and figuring out how I, as your college president, as well as the leadership team and others, support the progression in our particular departments, our classrooms, our service areas, and across our college. And so I am committed to that. I'm committed to listening. I'm committed to securing resources to support those promising practices that have shown proven outcomes for meeting our goals, which is closing opportunity gaps for our students, as well as maintaining our flagship identity as a college. So thank you all for everything you do. And I'd like to share just some of the accomplishments. And what I'd also like to ask as a mechanism for engagement is that you all go to our chat and highlight other things that have been phenomenal outcomes of the work that we've done that may not be highlighted in this list. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. This is a list of some of the things that we've done. But I think it's so important at this time where we have ambiguity and some uncertainty and lots of questions about where we're headed to be able to see what we have accomplished. So over the last semester, we had some healing activities. We did fondue with our hospitality department and Teresa being the lead. I was a fan of that event. 40 plus families joined that night, and it was wonderful to be able to not only see one another, but to see our children, our significant others in that particular space, enjoying each other's company and having lots of laughs and great music. So I want to again thank you all for those that were able to attend. I see many that were in attendance or taking to the chat. It was a phenomenal time. I also want to acknowledge Janae Loving and our former student in the improv event that they took place. Opportunity to laugh. Laughing is so imperative as we move through things that create a lot of weight, create a lot of tensions and anxieties and concern, and in some instances, for some of us, anger, right? And certainly for most of us, fear. So that laughter is so critically important, and I really appreciate Janae for stepping up as a leader to be able to provide that. There have been other things that have happened in that regard as it relates to healing. We had a vigil that ended up turning into a party. So for everybody that came to that, I want to thank you for showing up and not only acknowledging the loss of community members that we've had, such as Dean Murakami. We've had many other, Paul Baltimore, we've had students that have lost, we've had family members that we've lost, and it's really important to acknowledge not only those individuals, but the impact that they've had on our lives and the lives of our community members. And Dean is a great example of an individual who has had an impact on the community. So with that being said, we had that vigil. It turned into a party, small, intimate group, but certainly energized me, and I hope it energized others. So thank you for attending that. Then we talked about this hope, right? This horizon of returning to the ground. And we so are actually in that process, slower than most of us would like, cautious as we may be moving. We are definitely moving in that direction. And that certainly brings me joy. So I hope for all of you, it is doing the same. And then we talked about handling business. And in spite of everything, the work has not stopped. Faculty members have rolled back their sleeves, adapted for students, accommodating student needs, advocating for student needs, adjusting pedagogical practices themselves in order to be functional and provide quality education within this online environment. And for that, we can't underscore how deeply and passionately grateful we are to all of you. At the end of the day, as your college president, I recognize what my role is. Our work is education. And education happens in and out of the classroom, but no doubt, students come to our door for the in-classroom experience. And it's hard. It's hard to be engaged at a time when you're so disconnected from folks. As a community college, something that runs through all of us is this connection to people. And that sometimes does not translate in this online environment. So I cannot underscore enough how grateful I am for all of the hard work. And I know it sounds sometimes empty when you hear that. You must know that when it's said, it is meant. It is meant from the fiber of every fiber of my being around my gratitude. And it is also acknowledged how incredibly difficult this pivot has been. I think pivot doesn't even do it justice because the transformation that has occurred and the work that you all have done to adapt has just been phenomenal and far more than a pivot. For our classified professionals, the same rings true. In order to get students to that classroom, there are certain needs that have to be met. And you all have no doubt rose to the occasion and provided services online, translated forms and paper processes to the automated space. We still got work to do, no doubt. And much of that work that needs to be done is not a testament of your lack of commitment. It's a testament to the systems that we must refine in order to support our colleges and the employees that serve our students. And I take responsibility for that and will continue to do hard work in that particular area to make that easier for all of you. So with that being said, I'd like to touch on some of these accomplishments that have been shared with me that I have witnessed and I think important for you all to be aware of. I see you adding things to the chat. Keep doing that. There are so many amazing things happening in every nook and cranny of our college. It's important for us to not lose sight of those things that may not have elevated to the level where I have heard it. And I think that's important to highlight. So one of the things that we've done since spring to now is commencement. When we think about the magic of commencement, and I'm starting with something that was an event that was a connector. It brought folks together. For those of you that attended commencement and the drive-through process this year, I'd love to hear your perspective in the chat, but it was magical for me. We started our morning very early, but students started arriving from our categorical programs at about 9 a.m. And when we talk about those students arriving, these are students that are impacted by a multitude of things. Food insecurity, housing insecurity, transportation challenges. And these students showed up, and not only that, they showed out. So I'd like to share my screen with you of some of the images that we've captured during that particular ceremony. And let's see if I can make this work. You all, I could use a technical coach one day. So I have to get with Alice and the ITC team to get some strategies here. But thank you all for your patience as I move to these phenomenal images that I hope you can see on your screen. We had a number of our categorical programs come out, and I mean, there were stations for all of them. And I highlight to this particular detail because as you can see in these photos, the happiness, the joy, the enthusiasm that you experienced that day was infectious. It was palpable. And I enjoyed every single student and family that drove through our drive-through commencement. And so when we look at our students, you'll see our programs here. We have DSPS, we have TRIO, we have CalWorks, we have EOPS, our Veterans Resource Center, and so many more of our support services that attended. In this morning session, we had about 150 students come through. Again, some of our highest need students that transportation is an issue, and they found a way to arrive and participate early in the morning. And funny enough, many of them came back through during the formalized commencement later in the day. It really brought joy to my heart. And I spent the whole day making sure that students felt every bit of the joy that I felt seeing them and watching our students complete. So we had about 31 of our CalWorks students come through this particular drive-through graduation. We had 208 DSPS students come. 208 students that are weathering a remote environment, some of which have accommodations, that is a very huge obstacle to climb. I want to shout our DSPS program out for helping our students adapt, for making sure that they went the extra mile to ensure that our most vulnerable students from a cognitive and learning perspective had the support that they needed to persevere through completion. Kudos to all of you. Our EOPS program had 104 students come through. Our Journey program had 22. Our STEM SSS program had 19. We had 16 veterans come through. And amongst all of those, about 450 students through our categorical programs that drove through our graduation. Now, if you think about that for a moment, it really highlights not only their desire to have engagement, but their desire to have engagement with us, the individuals that were a part of their journey that allowed them to actualize their dreams. And in many instances for these populations, the dreams of their families, the dreams of their communities, right? The wildest dreams of their families and communities and loved ones. So this is a phenomenal outcome that I don't want to get lost in the challenges of the day, the gripes of the day, the issues of the day, all very valid. Right? All very valid. But this is the magic that happens in spite of that. And it's because of people. It's because of you all. So thank you so much. The resilience, right? When we talk about impossible to convert courses, right? We think about our faculty that have moved courses that have never been offered in the online space and figuring out how to make that work. It blows my mind. It truly blows my mind. And so when I sit across from a faculty member that has a critique, that has a complaint, that has an idea, that has an innovation, I am all ears. I'm all ears, because anyone that can adapt like that for the sake of our students, I'm on board with all day, every day. So it's phenomenal to know our nursing program in particular adapted. And when we think about our nursing program, not only did they adapt, but they had 100% pass rate by the end of their program. Who does that? Where do they do that at? I hope that I see the chat box kind of fired up here, because that is phenomenal work. That's hard work, it's head work, and it's commitment, and I am appreciative, so thank you. Public safety is the same, respiratory care. We think about all of these individuals that have never left the ground. That have continued to persevere through this process. And we are so absolutely grateful to have you as leaders at our college and have you as leaders in front of our students. And that does not negate the magic of all of our departments who wish they could have been on ground, right? Who are not prohibited to be on ground because of the conditions. And we salute you as well. I also want to acknowledge programs like automotive and welding and hospitality, right? The face-to-face classes and preparing for our summer, right? As we began to create this transition back, this particular programs have worked really, really hard to make sure things were safe, to make sure that they were keeping each other safe, keeping our students safe, but no doubt moving forward and continuing to do the great work of their particular programs. And for that, I really, really appreciate all of you for that energy. We talk about online and face-to-face teaching, and against all odds, we did it, y'all. You did it, right? Against all odds, you did it. We could have shut down, allowed students to do self-paced study, and continued on. And let me tell you, many institutions have moved in that direction. That's not what ARC does. That's not who we are. We lean in. We problem solve. We remain innovative, right? And that innovation warrants the support of your leadership. And I assure you, you have that support. Thank you for doing that. I want to say that in the midst of this, we haven't lost sight of our equity commitments. We haven't lost sight of our goals. We haven't lost sight of the work that we must remain engaged in. And so when I think about that, I want to just give a huge shout out to all of those faculty and classified and managers who served on the LGBT plus QIA DI project team, and also our AAPI project team. In spite of everything that was happening, these individuals came to the table and did an assessment of what the experiences are of our students from these communities. In many instances, went an extra step and also talked about what that looks like for employees, right? We can't do students well and see students if we don't see each other. It's really important that both of those are tended to. And these individuals went to the table and did this work in spite of their own lived experiences, in spite of their own trauma that they experiences grappling with these issues, grappling with the impacts, grappling with the marginalization and sometimes racist structures that impact their communities and their own identity. And so with that, I commend you all and applaud you all and thank you for the great work that you've done on behalf of our students. And I think it should be said that every single recommendation that those particular project teams put forward, as well as our African American and Black student project team, our Latinx student project team, and our Indigenous student project team, all of the recommendations that they put forward, we are supporting. We have approved, and we will develop a timeline and the resources to be able to move through that. And I will share more about that a little bit later this morning. We also have growth in our dual enrollment program. So when I think of Doug and Kate and Tara Reynolds and many, many others that are over there doing phenomenal work with our pre-college students, I just say thank you. That work is not only engaging our students, but it's engaging our K-12 partners. It's engaging the parents of those students. It's engaging the community of those students. And when we think about our enrollment, it's so imperative that we think about other mechanisms to acquire growth. And for us, that's going to be really important with some of the declines happening within our graduation rates. So with that visionary team that has not only leaned in as it relates to the relational aspect, but also as it relates to the process, procedure, and engagement component, I commend you, I salute you, and I thank you for doing all of that work while we contended with the day-to-day struggles moving through the pandemic. And then what I kind of saved for last, which I think is important, our operations and business, IT, research, all of these areas that have been on the ground, never left, and keep the wheels running so we can do the great work that we do is phenomenal. So I always, every space that I go into, I give a shout out to Cheryl. Cheryl Sears is a phenomenal talent that really is responsive to the needs of the college and very mindful about the impact on students and our colleagues. And under whose leadership, that has only flourished, right? You have a strong leader that is working in partnership with another strong leader, and they're making really sound judgments for our college. They're making really great strides as it relates to our facilities, as it relates to the morale of our team that's never seen, right? That do a lot of backbreaking work. So what I would say to you is when you have the ability to be on campus, when you see our custodians, when you see our tech folks, you see our engineers, you see any of these individuals on campus, show them love. When you got to ask for something to be processed, make sure that you give our business services folks love. They've done an incredible job adjusting forms and processes to accommodate to this particular space and remove some of the monotony to the work that we have to do, and we'll continue to do that work. So thank you. Annalise, you've been phenomenal. I want to give you love and shout out for all of the work that you've done. Phenomenal in that particular regard. So business services, operations, and doggone it, IT. And when I say IT, I'm thinking of ITC team members, DE coordinators, Jeff Booker and team, Camille, Edward, all of these individuals that are doing wonderful, wonderful things. And burning the midnight oil. Talk about tired. These individuals don't get breaks, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge that their contributions being absent, we could do none of the things that we do. And Randy, you have been phenomenal for me, and so I saved you for last. Your partnership and your ability to help educate me, not only about the history, but the work that is occurring, and letting me know all of the things that you all have accomplished while we've been in this space has just been phenomenal, mind-blowing, and I thank you, thank you, thank you. So appreciate all of you for all of the work that you do. With that being said, we continue to do great work. And again, that is not an exhaustive list. But when I look at this particular slide right here, it really highlights what students take away from us, right? We got future teachers. We got students talking about hard work and perseverance, no excuses, go get this work. And that is a testament of the tone that you all set, and not only shaping our students as it relates to their course work, but shaping them as it relates to their voice, their leadership, what I call their essential skills, or some would call their soft skills. It's so critical to navigate this world, understanding not only what's happening with your book and coursework, but also what's happening as it relates to your connection to the world and the people in it. And so for that, I thank all of you educators, all of our classified professionals who educate in different spaces. And I wanna just have the chat salute each other. So let's give some love out here in the space as we transition to the next topic. Again, there are tons of other things that we can share. I see especially Tom. Tom, thank you for everything that you do in IT to support our college. We really, really, really appreciate it and couldn't do it without you all. So with that being said, you all hopefully are going to have a treat, but I want to be able to share just a couple of high points with you before we take a break. Right? One thing that we have to acknowledge is that we can only be productive in Zoom so long. And so as I learned from you, our educators, about how you are mindful about that with students, I want to be mindful about that with you all. And so before we move into our keynote speaker, I want to create the opportunity for you to break away and take care of yourselves and get some coffee and do some of that. So I have a couple of more points that I want to make, and then we will transition to a break and then into our keynote speaker. So with that, equity, engagement, and outcomes. So critical that we stay laser focused. So when we talk about where we are, these are the things that we've been able to, address. Sorry about my slide change. So equity has been a part of our laser focus regardless, right? We've been engaged in that. The ways that we have done that is many of our programs. So our learning communities such as Pointe, Emoja, Prize, all of these particular programs coming together within our hub space, which is now our new Unite Center. And we'll share more about that. We'll do presentations and share some of the work that we've been working elbow to elbow and engaging with over the last semester, spring 21. And in this, we have strong leaders like Judy Mays, we have Veronica Lopez, we have Kathy, Ricardo. I mean, I can go on and on. Jesus. We have tons of leaders, Rod, and many, many others that I'm not calling out by name, but you know the players. These individuals are highly committed to our students, our DI population students, and keeping them engaged. And in partnership with our CTL and others, continuing to make sure that not only the work that we're doing as it relates to a sense of belonging and connection, but also tying that to this academic identity. So the Unite space is now, the hub has now become the new Unite space, bringing these particular communities together in ways in which they have commonalities, but also acknowledging the ways in which their lived experiences are different and nurturing that, supporting that, providing the resources to that. So some of what my leadership team has been doing has been looking at the Student Equity and Achievement Plan and the budget associated with it and making sure we right-size that. And through that hard work and tough decisions, we were able to recoup about $1.4 million to do really great work in advancing the efforts in these areas. And so I am super excited about the equity work underway. I totally acknowledge that there is much more to do. And some of the things that we are going to do to support that are underway. We've moved from our interim dean of equity and inclusion, and we've elevated that role to a AVP of equity, institutional effectiveness and innovation. And that's bringing these worlds together that will be a part of driving us into our future. And so I want to thank everyone who is engaged in that work, their commitment. It's hard work, it's emotional work, there's history, but folks have remained committed. And our goal will be scaling our programs in a way in which we can rely on the resources to do the good work of our students, and in particular, in this case, our DI populations. Engagement has been challenging, and so that will be a focal point as we move forward. But in spite of the challenges, you all have found a way, and so I really appreciate the work that you've done, and I could echo it several times. Our outcomes. So we talk about outcomes, and I will be honest with you all, we're not where we want to be. We're not where we want to be, but I'll tell you, all things considered, we're certainly not where we could be. And that is the hard work that you all have done to remain connected to your students, to make sure that they had resources. A shout out to the library team for bringing forward devices for our students so they can remain connected to our college, and IT for supporting those students and leveraging those devices. Without that, this is impossible to do. Our students wouldn't be able to persist. And that's our focus. So thank you to that particular team and many others, our tutors and others that have rolled back their sleeves. I think of ISAs on the back end that are doing incredibly hard lift. And so I want to thank them as well, because again, not seen or heard, but quite frankly, they're heard very loudly in their actions. So when we look at course success rates, I think it's important to know that in some areas we've seen some dips and some we haven't. So when we look at our comparing 2019 to our 2020, our African-American students, we've dropped a little bit, 1%. For our AAPI students, we've increased by 1%. For our Latina students, we've dropped a little bit, but I think it went from 67 to 64%. But I think what's important to understand that this data set does also not include our apprenticeship program. And we know that that population is concentrated within that program as well. So that speaks to some of this. Our native students went from 63 to 74%. I think a lot of that is the testament to the programming that's happening and the ecosystem that's being developed to support that population, that we will continue to identify those promising practices and institute them in other ways for other populations. And for our white students, 76 to 74. So we've seen a little bit of a dip there, got work to do. Overall, 72% to 70. So when I think about everything that is transpiring, that is pretty impressive, right? I think it's a little unfair to talk about the transfer goals at this particular point of math and English, just given everything that's transpired. We know that English has been impacted as it relates to enrollment. We also know that we're contending with other impacts, such as fraudulent enrollments that are having a huge impact on areas like nutrition and ESL and other areas. So need to be responsive to that and recognize that some of these trends is representing some of the anomalies that we're seeing that we don't have control over. So I want to thank you all. And I see psychology, absolutely. Psychology and other programs are also being impacted by that. And we hope to get our arms around what's transpiring. And I want to thank Frank Kobayashi for his leadership, and especially Kali Braden for his leadership, and working with our district and making sure that we do our own analysis of what's happening and make sure that the fix is being resolved in understanding the impact to American River College. So thank you all so much for your work there. Where are we headed? We're adapting. We're constantly adapting. We're still in the midst of ambiguity and uncertainty, but we are going to try to shore those things up as much as we can by being bold and vocal and asking questions. And I see in the Q&A, there are some questions in there that are absolutely important questions to ask, and we will continue to engage that. Capacity building, we talked about that a little bit around our student equity and achievement budget planning process and being able to bring resources to bear that weren't being leveraged in the most appropriate manner. Well, that opportunity will be something that is widespread. So the next program that we'll look at is our strong workforce resources and how that's being leveraged. The goal here is we have got to ensure that where we are heading to, that we have the ability to actualize the goals and commitments that we espouse. And so with that, that is resources being put in the places where we say that that capacity is necessary. And one of those that I can tell you just right off the top would be IT. If we are going to maintain some level in this online environment based on student demand or faculty will, then we're going to need the support in that particular area to do that work. And so capacity building will be critical in that effort. And then sustaining, right? To bring something to a community, to a student, to a faculty member, to a classified professional and take it away is impactful. It can be traumatizing depending on what that thing is, if resources, whether it's employees or fiscal resources. But I think the reality of it is if we can be mindful on the front end around what it is that we want to commit to and sustain, I think it makes those decisions easier. And so transparency is a part of that around budgets, transparency around communication. We're not experts on it yet. We're not amazing yet, but we will be. And I think that's important to acknowledge that we will be. So with that being said, I want to cover the last piece here, and that's thriving. As American River College, we don't know anything but flagship. We don't know anything but setting the tone. We don't know anything but innovation. We don't know anything but being trailblazers, and we will continue that. We will continue that particular trend. We will continue that posture. We will continue that identity. And a part of that is my responsibility to ensure your innovative ideas are supported and that your innovative ideas can be sustained in this environment. And I make that commitment to you today and throughout my time here as your college president. So with that, I want to thank you for everything that you all do for our college community. And I want to offer you the opportunity to take a small break, and then we'll come back and we'll move into our discussions around our keynote speaker and online engagement practices that can support us from a service delivery perspective or an educational perspective. So we will go on a 10-minute break and we will bring you all back in and we'll move and transition into our keynote speaker. Thank you all so much for your support, and I will see you shortly. I hope all of you were able to grab a cup of coffee. I see that you're sharing welcomes and hellos in the chat. And I hope you will make your way back to your station, desk, comfortable couch, wherever you are located, and rejoin us as we begin to move towards our keynote speaker. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Berry by reading the bio that was shared on our convocation page. But I also want to make a couple of acknowledgements around the importance of engagement. So we come together today as a celebratory moment to be able to share the great work that we've done, share our enthusiasm about starting the year. And this year, probably unlike many, some of the concerns, right, that we have about this particular year. And I want to contextualize, and as we kind of think about engagement, think about the state of affairs that is occurring around us. We think about what's happening with in Afghanistan with the community there, and there are huge impacts, not only for our students, our community at large, but also our employees, our family. And so we want to make sure that we are sending our hearts and love out to that particular community and advocating in ways in which we can. I think the same would be said around the diminishing hate that we have engaged in over the last 8 months, which is really rejecting the notion of hate as it relates to racial categories, religious categories, or identities, right? We stand strong in that perspective and that conviction. And I would just like us to be mindful and remember that as we think about engagement. And then I also would ask that we acknowledge some of the things that are happening from an environmental perspective that have impact. So all the love in the world and shout outs to our firefighters in our communities that are risking their lives to protect people's homes at a time that housing is of a commodity or of a premium. And then I also want to finally acknowledge some of the challenges that many of us are still experiencing as it relates to the impact of COVID. And so our families, our children, our loved ones, our communities, there's still work to be done there. So as the true spirit of American River College, we come together in community, we rally, we support, we send love, we exercise humanity and grace. And with that, Dr. Berry will come and share with us today ways in which we can show up that way in many respects in the online space. Now, this isn't a determination that online is the way of the future for American River College. We definitely will have a footprint there as it relates to interest and will of our faculty and certainly the demand of our students. But there's no movement to make American River College an online college. There's a commitment to making sure that when we're in online spaces, we have the tools that we need to be successful, feel competent, and maintain our high quality education. So with that, Dr. Berry is an educator and an expert in the field of teaching and learning with technology in the K-12 environment. She received a doctorate in urban education policy from the University of Southern California and her master's of arts in elementary education from Loyola Marymount University. Dr. Berry is currently an assistant professor of education leadership at the Graduate School of Education at California Lutheran University. Prior to becoming a professor, Dr. Berry taught elementary and middle school in Los Angeles. As a K-12 educator, Dr. Berry was focused on preparing underrepresented students, and in our language, disproportionately impacted students for college. She is an author of A Degree for Free, How to Save Time and Money on Your Education, and currently relevant guide to the college access for first-generation students of color. She currently conducts research on teaching and learning and equitable community building in the K-12 virtual K-12 environments. Her research has been featured in many academic journals, including Online Learning, the Journal of Computing and Higher Education, and the International Review of Research in Open and Distributed Learning. And at the academic conferences, including American Educational Research Association and Association for Study of Higher Education. Dr. Berry also an evaluator and has been a fellow with the American Evaluation Association. With no further ado, Dr. Berry, thank you for joining us today and sharing your wisdom, and I will turn it over to you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, President Dixon, for your warm welcome. Hello, everyone. It's so good to be with you, even at this distance. I hope that things are going well in Sacramento. I miss it there. I lived there briefly as a professor at University of the Pacific at our Sacramento campus. So I know the people in the area are wonderful, and I'm so glad to be with you all today. I want to extend my thanks to the Center for Teaching and Learning co-coordinators, Jen LaFlamme and Pam Chow, and also thank you to Sue McCoy for your work here. And thank you to you all, the distinguished faculty and staff of American River College, for bringing me here to share some time with you. I'm really excited. So I do have a presentation that I will share, but first I just want to get a brief feeling about online learning, and if there are kind of any kind of burning questions. I know that we might be a little short on time, so I want to weave in some of your concerns into my talk. So are there any kind of early thoughts or pressing questions or things like that? You can kind of pepper them in the chat. So any just kind of early thoughts or questions about online learning, if you'd like to share. And while you are getting those kinds of things going, I will start to share my screen. So let me see here. All right, so as noted, I'll be talking about online equity and student engagement. It's a big topic, but we'll cover some ground today. So as an overview for our conversation, I'll first be talking about why online equity matters, and then we'll talk about creating equitable, inclusive, and engaging online environments. And then I'll share some strategies for building community in online settings. I've been sitting in on your convocation, so I know that building community is very important to you all. And so that's something that we will kind of explore today, building connections, as you all are bringing up in the chat. So just to kind of share some caveats and do some level setting, here are some kind of my core values that I'm operating from. I believe that you are the expert on your experience, but I also believe that an outside voice can help us all see things anew and from different perspectives. I believe it's important to go back to our data, but not just our quantitative data. We'll be talking about the importance of qualitative data and some kind of pressing questions you can ask to get a sense of what's going on with your students in regards to online learning. I know that we can't address everything right now in these moments, but we can start to find some specificity out of the generalizations and the broad ideas presented today. So that's kind of my ask for you, is that you see what you can take from this and think about how it might apply to your setting, knowing that there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And I believe that being open-minded will open us up to the new possibilities that are emerging relative to online learning. So first, let's talk about why online learning and why online equity matters, and kind of the case for online learning. So as you may know, online learning is growing. It was something that was growing even prior to the pandemic. So as of 2017, 32.9% of American undergraduates were enrolled in an online course, and 13% were in a fully online program. 38% of graduate students were in online courses, and 28.9% were in a fully online program. We also know that women are more likely to take online courses than men are. And we know that students of color are represented well in online programs. 15% of Black undergrads, 12% of Pacific Islander, and 12% of American Indians and Alaska Natives were in fully online programs. So I think it's important for us to note that online learning was a growing sector and a diverse sector even prior to the pandemic. In terms of online learning and community college students, the research is very nuanced, the small body of research that there is. And those of you who are interested, I would love for you to continue research in this area, because we need more voices talking specifically about the community college context. But we know that community college students often alternate between online and face-to-face courses, depending on work and personal schedules. So some of our students might, take classes during certain seasons of their life online, and then in certain seasons, they might return in person. This also varies a lot by topic. Some students prefer to take some subjects online and some students in person. The overall takeaway here is that community college students, even more so than some other populations, may be attracted to the flexibility of online learning, and that's something that we'll talk about. At the same time, all students, and particularly community college students, may struggle with time management and isolation in their online courses. So those are some kind of things that we will discuss as well today. So in terms of your data, I was able to look at some of the kind of district-wide surveys that you all had collected. And this is from your spring survey. Now, I know that data might have changed. Things are changing day to day in the world that we live in. But at the time, when students were asked if they felt comfortable returning to an in-person class setting with the safety precautions in place, including the class sizes and social distancing, 41% said yes, they were comfortable, and 40% said no. So kind of an even split there, and then 18% saying they were not sure. In terms of other data from your Return to Campus survey, students expressed interest in online learning. So 44% said that they plan to return and take 100% of the classes online. 22.3% said that they plan to return and take a combination of online and in-person classes. And 15.7% said they plan to take all in-person classes if that is an option. So again, highlighting, at least at the time, a strong preference just district-wide for online and or hybrid options of learning. In terms of student support formats, there was similarly a widespread of interest for students, with students really kind of being interested in a combination of in-person and online supports for student support. So just pausing there, I just wanted to highlight again some of that data to just stress the imperative of online learning for your context and showing and highlighting how students are interested in this mode of instruction. In terms of preferred class formats, this was very interesting. So 43% expressed interest in asynchronous classes, 22% desired online, hybrid, synchronous, and asynchronous classes, 10% were interested in synchronous online classes, and then almost 20% were interested in in-person classes. So again, a widespread interest in a variety of different formats, but with a strong preference for asynchronous learning. I know some of this data as well is changing and it may be incomplete, but it's still something that's very interesting to highlight and something that we will talk about. So how does this inform our work? Well, we know that students in the Los Rios Community College District are interested in online and blended formats. And in some cases, they are interested in online classes and support. We know also that asynchronous learning in particular can be isolating. It can require strong time management skills. So we're going to spend some of our time talking about how we navigate all of that. So I want to talk about creating equitable, inclusive, and engaging online environments, specifically through the lens of a topic that's very important to me in my research, which is the importance of community. So first, for us to just define community. So I define community as a robust activity center where students work collaboratively. In a learning community, students give and receive support and develop feelings of membership, trust, and belonging. So for our big concept, if you take away nothing else, it's important to note that a sense of community supports student engagement, and student engagement facilitates retention. So when we think about why this matters, if students feel connected and supported to a learning community, they are more likely to stay in the academic program. And at this time, when there are so many threats to persistence, it's really important for us to think about what, if anything, we can do to help our students stay. Now, what supports community? As you all know, there are so many things. Even in your previous conversation, conversations, right? Highlighting the role of environmental context, economic context, global political issues. There are many, many things that can impact a student's sense of community. We have pre-college experiences, during college experiences, and life events. So I just want us to hold space and acknowledge that it's really complex and it's more than the sum total of our individual jobs. However, we also tend to focus quite narrowly on community and ignore this broader context, right? To our own peril. We often focus on what's highlighted here in the red, these during college experiences, the technology, the classroom, the interactions within the classroom. But especially as our colleagues who are doing student support know, all of these things in and around the class, what the students come to campus with, how they experience the campus also impact their sense of community. And even as we shift to online, it's important for us to be mindful to these realities. So I want to talk a little bit about campus climate, racial equity, and community. In some ways, community is just campus climate by another name. So I also was able to look at the ARC Institutional Equity Plan, and I want to salute you just on the labor that you're already putting into this important area. I know that you all have a strong foundation here and that you're looking to build. In terms of the campus climate challenges that were highlighted, here were some of the things that kind of stuck out. Students reported that they were experiencing microaggressions, bias toward racial group members, and other marginalized communities, a lack of knowledge and support for diverse religious identities and other marginalized communities, and a lack of diverse and equity-minded employees in some cases, resulting in limited mentor and role model opportunities. Some students also noted fear and concerns for safety, emotional and physical, and marginalized populations seen as problematic when they raise equity issues. Some also felt that there was a lack of inclusion of many groups in previous climate data, despite an interest in improving outcomes, and a lack of tools for assessment. So I want us to just kind of hold space for those realities as well, even as we know that community is important to us, just thinking about how those things might impact community. So again, turning our attention back to that definition of community as this activity center where there's collaboration, where there's support, where there's membership, belonging, and trust, and thinking again about the role of campus climate within those feelings. When we think about community and we think about campus climate, we know that community is the sum total of so many underlying things. And that's why I wanted to highlight the climate survey, because it can be very tempting to just say, how do I create community? And let's jump to that. But I want you all to start to consider also the equitable practices, behavior, decision-making, and also the interpersonal interactions that undergird your community. The inclusive practices, the collaboration, the membership, belonging, and trust, and thinking about all of those as supports that can impact your sense of community. And I know that so many of you are committed to doing the community building work and the underlying work, which is why you are here today. I know you have a strong foundation and you'll continue to move in that direction. And so I just want to remind us of our shared goal and purpose, and also congratulate you on your attentiveness to this important area. So in terms of getting more granular, I'd like to share some strategies for building community. I know that many of you are anxious about the start of the school year, and you might be thinking, what can I do right now, this week, this month? I got you. So I think it's really always important to be asking questions of ourselves, questions of our community members. So in terms of some questions to consider, no matter what your role is, if you're in the classroom, if you're doing student support, if you're doing other roles on and around campus, you can always ask your students how they feel about online learning. There's so much that we know, but so much that we don't know. It's always important to ask our students what has worked for them and what hasn't worked for them. I know this seems obvious and you may be thinking, I've already asked this question, but the more we ask these questions to more diverse groups of students, we can learn new field-tested strategies and manage expectations, right? So the benefit of asking is that your students will tell you what worked in other classes and whether classes or other programs or other spaces, and you can easily implement them. So go ahead and get that knowledge that's readily available to you. It's also important to know what resources students are currently plugged into and how they feel about these resources. When we think about building community, we want to think about the supports we can leverage and build on. We know that we cannot reinvent the wheel every single time. So if there are resources, if there are programs, and though some of those things are highlighted in your climate surveys and your reports, a lot of those strong points, things that are working really well for students. So asking students about if they know about the existing campus supports, and if they don't, how might you connect them to that? It's also always important to learn about the technology students use to participate in their online learning. I know that in the chat, there were some early questions about technology access. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that for some of our students, technology access is constantly shifting. Some students may have had access to computers because their children were provided with computers through a school district. And when those students went to summer school or returned to in-person instruction, that access to technology in the home changes. Some students might have devices that don't really work or that are under repair. So it's always important to continue to check in around those questions of technology access and to not assume that a student's access at the start of the school year is the same as their access at the end of the school year. And the benefit also of asking this question is that we can develop courses, programs, practices, support that is actually built on what students have at the time. So just wanting to always highlight that asking questions is something that we can do that's really, really helpful to us. And then what, right? So I think it's really important for us to resist the black hole of data. If you find yourself curious about the realities of technology and online learning, and you survey your students in your class, in your program, or anything like that, it's important that you respond to the data, right? We take this critical piece for granted. We have to report back and let our students know what we have heard. And if we are going to respond, if there are changes to be made, we need to share that with our students. Your syllabus or your syllabi are great spaces for you to respond to data. Your course websites are a great space for you to respond to data. And any other kind of publicly facing spaces, websites, bulletin boards, let folks know what you are doing. Let folks know about the changes that you have made. I know a lot of times we feel like students just don't respond, but sometimes they don't respond because they aren't sure if or how they are being heard. But the more you can show them how they're being heard, the more inclined they may be to communicate with you. So I want to talk a little bit about building asynchronous community. There are so many ways to build community, and I know a lot of us really prefer the synchronous mode like we're doing right now, and that emerges also in the research and the literature. At the same time, I know that many of you will be teaching asynchronously, and so I want to address that just because that is something that I know students may have challenges with in experiencing connection and community. So I want to highlight the strengths and the challenges of asynchronicity. One of the core strengths and a reason why a lot of students are drawn to it is that it offers flexibility, right? And this can be beneficial for students who are working, especially when they're working jobs with variable schedules or who are engaged in caregiving work. At the same time, students might find time management in this format very difficult in ways that they can't anticipate until they are already in the course. Another strength of asynchronous learning is that it does provide an opportunity for self-guided learning. For some of our learners, this is very empowering. They are already autodidactic and they are ready to go. However, giving and receiving peer support may be hard. And again, students might not know how much support they would need or like in a particular content area until the semester is already underway. Other challenges of asynchronicity is that motivation might be difficult to generate and sustain constant, subtle, and obvious reminders from a real-time instructor. And students might be concerned about how, or confused about how they can reach out for support. And it might be difficult, right? We take for granted, but there may not be a bulletin board, a discussion board, a physical space for students to even submit questions to you about your class or about your program or about your office. So how then will they receive support? And completion of asynchronous courses or tasks may be difficult overall. So why then might students in your district and at your school be interested in online learning, specifically in asynchronous learning? Well, I think a lot of the research points us to the simple balancing act that comes up, right, for a lot of students. They have many responsibilities, roles that they're engaged in, caregiving, work for themselves, and schoolwork, as well as, just other personal interests. So students might be attracted to the online format synchronously or asynchronously because they perceive it to allow greater flexibility. So just keeping that space in mind. So let's see, just pausing, scanning through the chat. I see that you are very active here, which is great as well. Let's see. So, and we will return to that. But a question that I have for you is that might there be a relationship between online learning preferences and campus climate? Now, this is not something that I know or that I'm saying, but just something for you all to consider. You may have noticed, but there has been a wide body of literature and research emerging about the buffer of online learning and what it provides, particularly for individuals from underrepresented and marginalized groups. So here is a headline of an article from the New York Times about how some women of color are not ready for the return to the office. And it says, after more than a year of virtual work, employers are making plans to get back to the physical workspace. This has many workers worrying about the return of microaggressions and bias too. And another article here from the Washington Post that says many Black women felt relieved to work from home, free from microaggressions. Now they're told to come back. And this is important, so I just highlight these articles, you can look them up, but this is an ongoing theme in every major publication across the country, from the Chronicle to the Times, the New York Times, LA Times. So something, again, for you to consider. So here's an excerpt from the New York Times. It says, research backs this sentiment, the sentiment of folks being concerned about the return to in-person kind of work. In a survey by the Slack think tank Future Forum, a whopping 97% of Black respondents in the United States said they preferred a fully remote or hybrid workplace. Only 3% of Black workers surveyed said they wanted to return fully in person, compared with 21% of white workers. In another study from the same group, Black workers reported a 50% increase in their sense of workplace belonging and a 64% increase in their ability to manage stress once they began working from home. The study concluded that flexible work was critical to a feeling of greater inclusion for Black workers. The article also talks about women of color and people of color more broadly. And they go on to say, to be sure, remote work brought many challenges for women of color, but a return to in-person work will also mean a return to microaggressions, pressure to conform to white standards of professionalism, and high rates of workplace stress and burnout. Many of the microaggressions women of color face happen in person. Things like having your hair touched or people commenting on your body or asking, what are you eating? It smells weird, Dr. McClooney, who's quoted in the article, said. This is why we don't all want to go back to the office. This article also talked about the experiences of the AAPI community. And one doctor said, "I've heard AAPI women express concerns about their physical safety while walking outside," Dr. Pham said, referring to the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. "And more leaders must consider this as in-person work requires commuting." So many of you were highlighting even earlier in kind of your presentations, the reality of social and political and cultural context and how that's impacting our students. And similarly, just wanting to highlight that for some students, online learning could prevent a buffer that helps them feel actually more connected and safer in the campus environment. So individuals, particularly who have concerns for their physical or emotional safety, may feel like online learning provides them with a buffer from difficult environments. Participants or persons experiencing a lack of support or connection and who are experiencing microaggressions may find online learning, and particularly asynchronous experiences, a buffer from those types of realities. So I brought that up just because when I was reviewing the climate survey, those were similar kind of themes and experiences. And so as we kind of think about how to make sense of your own data about how students might prefer online learning, think not just about the technology, but what that could mean for their lived experiences and their engagement with the campus. So let's see. I also then want to talk about, let's see, I see you all are active in the chat and folks are talking also about the experiences of working with the disability, thinking about things to pause. And some of the comments are very realities for queer folks. Yes, so this is happening across the board. And again, it's a really growing area of discussion that we all can look further into. Just thinking about our time, I do want to share some additional strategies for creating community, and then we can return to this or other topics. So in order to create community, collaboration must occur. And this is important, even for your students. A lot of students will be drawn to online learning and asynchronous learning because they want to work by themselves. And that's really great, right? Until they dive in and realize that support is needed, right? We go to school in part because we want to be a part of a community, in person or not. So students need to work with you. But also to cultivate a sense of community, they also need to work with other students. So I would challenge you to think about how in the online space you can encourage collaboration. I know that's very difficult. Even right now, as I'm presenting to you, I acknowledge that this is not the most collaborative or interactive way that we could do this. I know it's very, very hard, but it's something that we can think about. And if we had more time, we would be more interactive too. So just wanting to acknowledge the importance of collaboration. I want to talk a little bit about how we can create collaboration in asynchronous classes. So first, it's important to think about how we can make these spaces more interactive. Something simple you can do is just assign a role for discussion boards or other activities. Even putting students in small groups where some are designated perhaps as leaders, as discussion board starters, as kind of folks that are challenging positions placed on the discussion board, or folks that are affirming other positions can really help make the space more interactive. It's important not to be afraid of multimedia as well, right? Voice memos and video are important ways that students can participate and can kind of share in online classes. So everything does not have to be text-based. So just thinking about that. You might consider creating your own content to engage with your students as you are able. I know that the work of content creation is very difficult and time consuming, but I also know that some of you are already engaged in that and are interested. So where you can create your own videos, long or short, discussing your courses, your own audio, podcasts, or even voice memos, or even your own authentically heartfelt and written messages can go a long way towards student engagement. Allowing some students to lead learning activities, including discussion boards, is another way to shore up engagement. Again, asking students what best practices have looked like for them in the past and including that regularly into their work and acknowledging that you are responding to students' desires is another way to boost engagement. And also, don't be afraid to develop opportunities for synchronous socializing, right? We tend to think of it as a binary, either an asynchronous course or a synchronous course. But as your surveys pointed out, some students do want that synchronous connection, a great deal of them, and some even want that in-person connection. So doing whatever is appropriate also for you and your needs, but there's nothing wrong with having a little Zoom social hour or something like that and encouraging students to collaborate. In terms of thinking about your extracurricular spaces, it's so important that you respond quickly to asynchronous communication or whatever communication you have. If you're expecting students to engage with you in that way, you want to be responsive. It can be really helpful to create videos and other tools that share information about yourself and how students can collaborate with your office or department, even down to having a visual tour, right? Students have never seen your space and they may have never seen you. So helping them put a name behind the face and recreating some of those things that would happen naturally in the in-person environment can be very beneficial to students. You can leverage multimedia to create culturally relevant content targeted at different underserved and underrepresented groups, right? So where you might not have diversity in your staff, you may be able to have diversity at least in your content. So that's something to think about. Even as you're connecting students online, don't just connect them with your services. Think about ways you can connect them with peers. Might you have asynchronous or synchronous groups, small groups, and learning communities where students can connect? And again, the learning communities emerged in your kind of climate report as something that was working really well for the campus, but how can you create even smaller groups and smaller micro communities to help students connect around needs, interests, and the unique support that your divisions provide? It's also important to acknowledge where you might have missed the mark in the past and highlight your growth and evolution as individuals and departments. Share with students what you've learned. Let them know the ways in which you've adapted due to the pandemic, due to growing racial literacy, due to growing cultural literacy, or due to emerging interest in new personnel. Those kinds of things will help students who might be reticent to engage with some aspects of the campus. And again, developing opportunities for synchronous socializing is something that we can't take for granted, right? Because that is something that students are desiring, students and faculty and staff. So as you leave, it's important, I think, for you all to think about how you might create more collaborative opportunities with and for your students. Acknowledging that this will look very different in each class, in each department and division, but it's still something to think about as an overarching question and as a small group discussion. In terms of supporting community asynchronously, some other things you can think about are developing clear guidelines for your assignments, for your course, or for your activity, right? Letting people know how they should engage to be successful. You can utilize tools like screencasting and other technologies to walk students through the virtual classroom, the website, the student support services, right? Again, all of those things that might happen in person, how can you leverage technology to recreate that? If you have platforms for communication, take an active role, commenting on student work publicly to affirm the high quality engagement and participation. And if there are students who appear to be struggling, who appear to be disengaged, or who are having a difficult time, follow up with them privately to check in and learn more about what is going on. In terms of synchronous settings, it's much the same, thinking about how you might orally affirm student participation, how you might utilize chat and other features to engage learners, particularly those who are off camera. I know a lot of faculty really struggle with getting students to use the cameras, and that's just such a tricky issue. But the more you can kind of interact with chat, just as you all are doing in this presentation, using emojis, using polls, using breakouts, you may not get students to turn on their video, but you may get them to increase the engagement. And also, the more that you as an instructor or a facilitator take an active role in those student spaces like breakout rooms, you will encourage student engagement. So in terms of thinking about these facilitation kind of techniques and how they support equity, well, some of the things that we talked about help really level the playing fields. They make more visible the inequalities. They start to decenter some of the power dynamics, right? The more students can lead tasks, the more some of those power dynamics are decentered. The more we ask questions, the more we're creating greater space for expression for students, especially those who might be otherwise marginalized. And finally, some of this allows faculty and staff to adopt the role of the learner, right? To listen. When you start to adopt the role of listener, you become a learner as well, right? And I can only tell you so much about your students, but your students can tell you best. So the more that we ask them these kinds of things, the more we can learn about how to best support them. So in terms of another tip, it's important to model those engaged participation and really outline the norms. We want to be really explicit here, just as we have guidelines for ourselves about how we want to engage, how often we want to respond, what a substantive response to a question or query is. It's okay to kind of tell students as well what you are expecting in terms of participation or what works best and what facilitates student support, right? So modeling kind of this engaged participation really supports equity by making the hidden curriculum more visible, right? A lot of students don't always know how to write a professional email. Unfortunately, they may not know how to leave a voicemail, how to communicate with the leader. So rather than just kind of taking it out on them or critiquing the student, we can start to make that hidden curriculum more visible. So something else for you to consider are, what are the unspoken rules or norms that might need to be explicitly modeled in your classroom, department, division, or office? Some of this will be discipline and domain specific. Some of this will relate to the operations and tasks that you perform. But it's important for you to reflect on what are some of the things our students just might not know about how to work with us, and how might we start to share and highlight this in a culturally sensitive, relevant, and appropriate way. So something else that I think is really important for creating a sense of community is connecting teaching, learning, and student support to the real world. And again, I know that many of you were doing that as well, just with your kind of acknowledgement of different broader global contexts that are happening, right? We know that there are a number of causes and situations that our students are caring about. And so you might think about how you bring that into your activities. And I saw the wonderful things that President Dixon was highlighting in terms of what you're already doing and how you bring that into the classroom as well. And the more that you can start to connect teaching, learning, and student support to the real world, the greater engagement you will see in terms of your students and the greater sense of community, right? Because our students want to connect to our classrooms, to each other, and to the broader world that they are immersed in. Something else that is important to think about in terms of community is how you can help students move up and down the continuum of digital skills. As we use technology, it's important to think that we're not just using technologies like Zoom. We want to be building our students' capacities to learn, to create, and to innovate using these same technologies. So if you look at this continuum, we see on the bottom, there's some kind of basic level technical skills like searching or just Googling it, I call it, or highlighting, copying, cutting, and pasting. But one of our goals with technology is to move students up this ladder to analyzing, to evaluating, and to creating their own content. And we know that many students are already interested, particularly in this aspect of content creation. Hello, TikTok. So how do we bring those kind of literacies into our classrooms and into our supplemental programs, not only as tools that we use, but how do we build students' capacities to use these same tools? And this is really important for students' personal, professional interests, right? These are all skills that are increasingly valuable on the labor market. So the more that our classrooms and co-curricular offerings can support students' technology-related skills, the greater engagement we will see, because students know that these are things that they need to continue to participate in the workforce. So I ask you to start to think about how you can be moving students up the digital skills continuum, thinking about blogging, filming, podcasting, directing, all various forms of content creation, right? And moving beyond just kind of writing and discussion, but innovation. And I see that Randy's offering some ideas and ITC and CTL. So I know that you all already have great support on campus to continue this type of work. So in terms of building digital skills, you want to think also about creating virtual and in-person opportunities to highlight the academic, social, and emotional skills that folks are actually learning during this time. You can support students in creating authentic digital content in the spaces where they're already engaged, like TikTok and YouTube. And you can provide project-based learning opportunities that leverage technology to meet community needs. For example, I've worked with my students to start to asset map resources in the community and share those resources with families so that they know, for example, where they can get food or clothing, right? Or as we do evaluations, thinking about how we can do data visualization to actually move teachers and school leaders toward a greater understanding of data and improving their teaching. So it's not that you have to do things that take you totally outside of your topic, your field of study, or your program, but how can you see a greater connection between leveraging digital skills to communicate with your students and to help them communicate with the larger community? You can also have students develop podcasts and multimedia where they're reflecting on their teaching and learning, and assist students with creating portfolios that can assist with college and job applications. Just noting here that authentic learning experiences support engagement, they support connection, they support community. So as we start to wind down and do a little bit of Q&A, it's just important for us to think about community is central to equity. When students are supported in cultivating feelings of membership, support, trust, and belonging, they're more likely to feel connected to their classrooms, to their activities, to the institution as a whole. Educators can be intentional about facilitating community by using some of these engagement practices that we discussed, and by looking at the policies, practices, and behaviors that might pull some students in or might push some students away. And finally, just wanting to leave you with the thought that we all play a vital role in supporting students' sense of community, be it online, be it in person, in hybrid settings, synchronously or asynchronously. We all have an important role to play. So I thank you all for playing that role. I thank you for showing up. I'm really excited about the great work that you are doing here at ARC and that you'll continue to do over this school year. So with that, I thank you, and I will take some of your questions. All right, so let's see. There are so many questions peppered in the chat. Let's see, I might ask Jen to pitch one to me if they are able. Let's see here. Let's see. Okay, so I see one. So This is a really interesting question. So someone asked about mathematics specifically, and kind of creating online assignments outside of discussions that promote equity and inclusivity. Any advice for areas that are more technical in terms of work assigned? So I think the first step here is collaborating in small groups to discuss as kind of like teams or divisions what's working and kind of like what's not working in terms of delivering instruction in this way. I definitely hear this point though, that like text-based instruction might be difficult or limited. I think as instructors in say math or some of the sciences, video can be a great tool in terms of how you communicate with your students. And you can also have students create their own videos where they are walking you through how they're solving their problems, or they can create their own audio files. So I think that's some in terms of fields that would have you kind of demonstrate what you're learning in ways that aren't so text-based. Think about how you can leverage video or audio. It's also, I know that math is more than say equations, so there is an opportunity for project-based and collaborative learning, case study work, or other things where students are solving problems of practice. And those kinds of learning activities might heighten students' sense of engagement and connection when we think about that real world application. So again, thinking about what kind of projects and problems students can solve that require them to demonstrate mathematical competency, but take them kind of beyond the kind of simple Q&A. I hope that answered the question. So another question that I'm seeing here is how to create online course policies that are flexible and supportive of equity. So that's a good question. I think it's hard to answer without a little bit of specifics or context. So if the questioner wants to share a little bit more, but I think in terms of just on the broadest level, right? Thinking about how our students are experiencing a number of changes and transitions. And so the more that you have dates, deadlines, or elements of your course that are very rigid, think about how that might be pushing some students out and away. The first way we can approach flexibility is just even our own approach. Are we providing flexible deadlines and dates? Are we providing multiple ways for students to submit? Are we regularly checking in with our students to understand what kind of experiences might be altering their context in real time? So the more that we ourselves are flexible, the more that our course will be flexible and the more that we're transparent, right? So is your course a one and done where students have a set number of points to reach and they either hit it or they fail? Or are you offering, say, opportunities to resubmit, to revise, to do makeup work, things of that nature, I think would really be supportive and promote equity. So someone says, from a student services perspective, are there any strategies to engage with students who use so many platforms, Instagram, Discord, TikTok, Reddit, along with email, campus platforms to receive information? Yes, I know that's very tricky in terms of student services. I think it's important to kind of survey the population early on to learn what those preferred platforms are, but then also set some expectations for yourself in that you cannot have a presence across every platform. It's not realistic. You don't have the time and the bandwidth, and I don't know that your students are asking for that either. So I would say if there's a platform or space where you feel particularly skilled, where you feel that you or your team can manage it, that might be something that you use. Say TikTok, that is something that folks are finding fun and engaging. Not all, I don't use TikTok personally, but if that's your jam and you feel like it's the jam of some of the students, then try it. I think it's important to find synergy between the digital kind of tools that you yourself or your office likes to use and you, your students, your population, your subpopulation might like to use. I would would say that it's also important for you to make sure that your traditional platforms are very clear, comprehensive, and accessible. So when all else fails, a lot of students are going to go to the website. So the website should be comprehensive and house that information. So I think do the platforms, but also think about what your central hub is and how clear that is. And if you have time and capacity, you might utilize those platforms, the other ones, knowing that there is a trade-off. Okay, how to help students doing courses mostly or entirely on their phones. The phone conversation is very nuanced. I know I did a research project with some high school students, and for me, I was very concerned that they were doing a lot of their online learning through their phones, but for them, they were fine with it. That's how they communicate. So I think it's important for us to be open-minded about what that means and what that looks like, understanding that for some students, the phone is the most stable place for them to say, access the internet. Something that you can think about, though, is how accessible your course is via phone. I would encourage you, if you have a smartphone, to check out your Canvas or your Blackboard site through your phone. Is it very difficult to access? Are there many, many windows or folders students have to click through to find relevant information? And then try to experience that from a perspective of, say, a person who has limited Wi-Fi. In fact, try to access your course through public Wi-Fi. Go to McDonald's and see what that experience is like. The more you can do this user experience research and see what that experience is like, you will see, oh, wow, maybe I need to simplify my folders on my Canvas site. Maybe I need to clarify. Maybe I have too many links. Maybe I don't have not enough links. So the more you can walk yourself through that student experience, the clearer I think that it will be. So let's see. Another question is about online or hybrid formats. Oh, okay. High flex, I think this question is about, where there are some in person and some online. This will provide students with a mix of asynchronous flexibility. Okay, so I gather that this person is asking about high flex and in terms of data. Well, that's an interesting area. I don't think there's actually a lot of data about high flex. It was just kind of pitched as something that folks should do. And so a lot of folks are doing it. I think that, high flex is exciting. It can be difficult. So I guess what I would say in terms of high flex is to just be really clear about what you're actually doing. What is kind of your run of show for your course? Having a clear agenda for your students and sharing that with your in-person and online, particularly with your online in case you get disconnected. Having clear designated breaks and periods of time where you'll be working with the in-person group, working with the online group. Getting really clear about what collaboration looks like, or if collaboration is to be expected between in-person and online teams, is important. And making sure you're not neglecting the online space, right? Because we've all been in high flex meetings before the pandemic. We've been that one person to call into the meeting and everyone else is in the room. And oftentimes we can get ignored. So really thinking about how you'll do that delicate dance between the folks in person and the folks online, I think is very important. So another question came in terms of students in developmental courses in the online environment. And this gets into the piece about the hidden curriculum, right? A lot of our students, particularly those that might be newer to the college setting, returning students, and or students facing academic difficulties, may not necessarily have strong, say, study skills or things like that. So how will you break that down from the lens of this is how you study and prepare for the online course? So some things that I talk to my students about about even are, what does a strong and productive work environment look like in the online space? Being mindful, right, that folks are learning and living in shared spaces, but do you have your books and your resources kind of set up clearly in an identifiable place? Are you establishing some order and quiet? Are you closing down, say, your other tabs on your computer so that you can focus? Your online course might be very difficult if you are navigating between Twitter and your course. So really even talking to them about what engagement looks like and having honest conversations. With my first year students, I've had to talk about how doing our course from our bed when we're inside the bed might be difficult. Now the bed might be their only learning space, but at least how can we prepare that space so that we can support engagement? So I'm getting some comments about wrapping up. And so if there is one last question, Jen will take that before we go. Let's see. The question is about accommodating students who are working all day and night. When they run into issues, it feels like you have to be available 24 hours a day because some wait until 11 p.m. to begin a task. Yes, I hear that. I know that's very difficult. I think it's very important to just be transparent about what your availability looks like, acknowledging that you may have family, personal responsibilities, or just simply need sleep. And so, I tell my students, everybody knows I go to bed early. So, if they email me at midnight, that's great. And I will answer it at 8 a.m., and that's not to say that they can't email me, but just not to kind of expect that. And I think people can respect that, right? A lot of folks are just simply working at the times that are best for them. That might be 1 or 2 a.m., but you don't have to do that. You cannot do that. Or maybe you can, but like just being realistic about what that looks like. And if there are other vectors of support, right? Sometimes we have to let students know what may be a question for IT and what might be a question for the course, and encouraging them to reach out to those channels. And those channels might have automated responses or things like that. We might need to let students know, here's the crisis support and resources and things like that. So I think having an honest conversation at the start of your term about when you can be reached, what you can be reached about, but also connecting them and making sure they have those contact points for other questions will help make things more manageable for you and more clear for your students. So I do know that you all have a few other business items to get to. This has been a really robust and engaging conversation. I do hope I can come back and discuss with you more. But with that, I really want to thank you, President Dixon, thank the various teams, the divisions, and thank you all for your time today.
Dr. Berry, we cannot thank you enough for your wealth of insight, expertise, strategies were phenomenal. And let me say, we started Convocation at 8:30 this morning and the chat is blowing up. The engagement that you have been able to move us through, we really, really appreciate. And I think it highlights some of the strategies that you are recommending to our college community. So I would say to you all in the chat, continue to show your appreciation for Dr. Berry. And I am very pleased that you had mentioned wanting to come back and work with us. Because what I would like to have happen is have you come back and do a more hands-on training with our faculty to work through scenarios, real live case studies around the issues that we encounter and practical solutions based on the infrastructure that we have and what we will need to implement. So Beavers out there, if you believe that that's a good idea and you want Dr. Berry to come back, please include that in the chat. And we want to thank you again. And I look forward to working with you in the future, Dr. Berry. Thank you so much for your time today.
Wonderful. Thank you all once again. It was so great to be with you, and I wish you a happy school year.
Now with that, it was a phenomenal presentation, a lot of strategies, but what I am also impressed by is the strategies that you all are sharing with one another in the chat, ways in which you are engaging students. And I think I want to highlight that I was impressed by many of the strategies that Dr. Berry covered today. Our ITC, CTL, and faculty members are engaged in that particular work right now. So it suggests that we are on the right track in many respects, and there are other areas that we need to do some work. So right now we're getting ready to start winding down our time together, but we don't want to wind down without remaining inspirational about this year ahead of us and appreciative about the work that all of you all have done. So with that being said, I have the great honor and pleasure to introduce President Ortiz to join us and address you all today. Thank you so much for joining us, President Ortiz, and good morning.
Thank you so much, Melanie. So to all of our participants today, I really want to share that as the president of the Board of Trustees, that I am representing our full board. We're so pleased to be with you today with the American River faculty and staff to help kick off the fall 2021 semester. You know, convocation is always such an exciting time because it's the beginning. It's filled with optimism and it's filled with enthusiasm and looking forward. But as we all know, this last year, you know, at this time, if you reflect, we didn't know what was going to be our world today. Last year, we braced ourselves for a year of many unknowns, and then there were new unknowns that arose. There was so much uncertainty about the public health conditions. We were really very worried about our budget outlook, given the uncertainty about state revenues and the work before us. We were unclear how we were going to be able to carry that out to really stay focused on the systemic barriers that so many of our students face in their daily lives. But here we are today, 1 year later, and much has changed, yet much of that uncertainty remains. After months of trending in the right direction, public health conditions are now worsening around not just our community, but the state and the nation, and quite frankly, the world as a result of the Delta variant. The immediate budget crisis, fortunately, has been averted. The state has given us significant one-time revenues, and the feds stepped in with significant one-time dollars. But our long-term financial future picture is still driven primarily by enrollment, which is very much unclear. Enrollment will continue to be an open question going forward, and that will be our biggest challenge as we look at the future of the district. The issues of inequity and systemic barriers for students have been exacerbated over the past year, as a pandemic has shined a spot on pre-existing disparities in resources and access to higher education that the pandemic has multiplied. We know that our most vulnerable students remain even more vulnerable today. And yet, in spite of all the challenges we face, my colleagues and I on the Los Rios Board of Trustees are filled with much hope and optimism about the future of our district and our colleges. Not because the challenges we face are hypothetical or fiction. These challenges are very real. We are optimistic because of the faith and trust we have put in all of you. You are the incredibly talented, passionate, and hardworking team, our faculty, staff, and administrators. We have tasked you with meeting these challenges, and it's not gone unnoticed how much we are asking of you. In the past year and a half, you have shown unprecedented creativity and flexibility, and a willingness to work together to solve problems that none of us could have ever predicted we would be facing 18 months ago. You have had the ground underneath you move on multiple occasions, and constantly you have had to adjust your plans in real time as circumstances beyond our control continue to evolve. And I wish I could say that this next year was going to be easier, but it likely won't be. We'll likely need to continue to be nimble as we respond to the twists and turns of the pandemic, and we'll need to push ourselves to find new and better ways to serve our students at a time when they need us most. but there is nobody that our board would rather entrust this work to than all of you. Thank you for everything you have done and will do to support our students. You all inspire us as much as you inspire them. And now it is my great pleasure to welcome our Deputy Chancellor, Jamey Nye.
Thank you, Board President Ortiz. It's my pleasure to be here at ARC to help kick off the fall semester. Just doing a quick share screen. The last time I spoke at Convocation, I was speaking as the Academic Senate President at CRC about 15 years ago, and we were all together in the college's recital hall. I miss seeing all of you at ARC, and I wish we were able to be together in person. You were probably expecting to see and hear from Chancellor King today for his traditional remarks. I'm sorry to say that he can't be here because despite being fully vaccinated, Chancellor King tested positive for COVID-19 earlier this week. His symptoms have been relatively severe for a breakthrough case, but he is recovering and fortunately resting at home. Those of you who know Brian know that it takes quite a lot for him to be out. We think we remember the last time was about 4 or 5 years ago. We were talking with the Chancellor's office staff, and his office is across from mine. He didn't look well on a Monday, and he was in his office, keeping to himself. No one was going in there. And he refused not to come to work. And by Wednesday, he was really sick and had walking pneumonia. So he's not one to miss work lightly. And he really wanted to be here today. And he asked me to wish you all the best as we begin the fall semester. But his absence and his illness really underscore the severity and stubbornness of this pandemic and why the work to keep our students, faculty, and staff safe is at the top of all of our minds. To that end, I'd like to start by providing a brief update on the work district-wide to prepare our students and all of you for a safe return this fall. As you know, about 2.5 weeks ago, our board passed a resolution directing staff to implement a policy requiring all students and employees who access our facilities to be vaccinated at least the first dose by October 1st. The goal is simple. Los Rios has the opportunity to lead by example and incentivize smart public health choices for our students and employees. We need to do everything we can to keep one another safe. Implementing a requirement like this in such a short time period has been no small task. And college and district teams have been working night and day to build the necessary technology infrastructure and business processes, communicate about the requirement to our district communities, and plan for the impacts of this policy on our instructional and student services work. We have made a lot of progress in the implementation. So far, more than 11,000 employees and students combined have successfully uploaded their vaccination status to our new system. But there are still many unanswered questions and operational details we are working through. If you have questions about the requirement, I would encourage you to regularly check our vaccine website. We are updating the site regularly with the latest information. In addition to the vaccination requirement, we will also be following the Sacramento County order and requiring that everyone, regardless of their vaccination status, wear a mask when indoors in any of our facilities. We know there are questions about how we are going to enforce this policy, and we want to make sure faculty and staff have the tools they need to address any issues when they arise on campus. President Dixon already shared the specific phone number to call ARC, and I believe you also have that in an email. With the Delta variant leading to a steep rise in cases and deaths in our area and around the country, we believe that the combination of the mask and vaccine requirements will go a long way to keeping everyone in our community healthy. Many have also asked what we have done to our physical buildings to make sure they are safe for a healthy return. Our facilities team worked throughout the summer to ensure that our facilities have upgraded HVAC systems in place consistent with CDC best practices. You can find more information about facilities and sanitation protocols at our reopening page. There's no question that this pandemic has been and continues to be the most significant thing on all of our minds leading up to the start of this semester. And its impacts on all of us have been severe. Just about every one of us knows someone who has been personally impacted by COVID-19, and many among us have lost loved ones, friends, and even coworkers to this deadly disease. It's really important that we not lose sight of the human element in all of this, and that we show empathy and patience for one another. The impacts have been real for our colleges as well. As you are all well aware, enrollment is down significantly at all 4 of our colleges and just about every community college in the nation. Everyone in our district is working hard to find creative ways to serve students amid these extraordinary circumstances, and particularly reach out to students in communities that have been disproportionately impacted. As you also know, our colleges are primarily funded based on our enrollment, so this has a very real operational impact. We've been through declines in enrollment before, but this one is different, and the old playbook for expanding access doesn't work anymore. Fortunately, we have had an influx of one-time state and federal resources to help us with critical operational needs at this urgent time. Those one-time funds are vital and are allowing us to put resources into our facilities, personal protective equipment, technology needs, and student vaccine incentives, among many other things. But we should be clear-eyed that when the one-time funds go away and the state's hold harmless ends, we'll need to address our access issues. Fortunately, our district has a long history of weathering financial difficulties better than just about anyone else in the state. We work closely with all of our labor partners to ensure that we don't spend money before we have it, and that we always take care of our people. Those of you who know someone who works for another college or district probably know that the retro payments that Los Rios faculty and staff received earlier this week are not commonplace in other districts. To close, I'd like to reiterate the message from Board President Ortiz and offer my sincere appreciation for each and every one of you for the work you have done in the past 18 months. I know it has been challenging and at times chaotic. Last year in my own home, I had my freshman son, Connor, in school on Zoom upstairs, and between meetings, I was his PE playmate. My daughter, Camille, who was a senior and who begins as a full-time student in Los Rios tomorrow, was in the living room, and my wife, Tara, was teaching kindergarten in the kitchen on Zoom. I was downstairs in the office, which was an old playroom with my 2 dogs, Bowman and Foster. Preparing for today, I did complain to my wife about having to manage 3 screens and a PowerPoint on Zoom all at the same time. And her response was, "Now you almost know what it's like to teach kindergarten on Zoom, but try doing it while wearing a silly hat." She also said, "You have to smile through it because kindergartners smell fear." We have challenges ahead of us, but Los Rios is strong and we are resilient, and there's nothing we cannot do for our students if we work together. I wish you all a successful fall semester. Now it's my pleasure to introduce President Melanie Dixon.
Deputy Chancellor Nye, we appreciate you joining us and sharing those updates with the understanding there's still much more conversation and information to be disseminated. ARC will continue to engage in listening sessions and providing information hot off the press, as you will, as we get it. But thank you for sharing what you have, and please send all of our community's warm wishes to our Chancellor as he begins to work through the challenges associated with COVID. Thank you so much and have a great day. So as we wrap up today, Beavers, we've accomplished a lot. We've talked about our highs, we've talked about some of our challenges, we've talked about some of the considerations, and then we've talked about ways in which we can lean in and concrete strategies. So the takeaway and the wrap up for Convocation, as you all move into your area meetings and dive into deeper discussion, and as we throughout the next semester and academic year begin to delve deeper in this discussion, there are things that will need to be brought to bear as we proceed in doing this work of our students and our community and of one another. So I wanted to share with you all, as I put in the chat in response to many of the statements around workload and the strategies needed, technology exposure. There's going to be a need to invest in our professional development, and the executive team and I have worked diligently to identify where some of those resources would come from and to do that work. And much of that will need to be in conversations with our professional development coordinators at the classified and faculty level. We'll need to ensure that our managers are being developed in ways and allow them to address the change that's at the fore, and moving barriers out of the way for faculty and classified professionals as we make more pivots to adapt to this environment that, quite frankly, isn't all the way certain, right? As you've heard Deputy Chancellor Nye state. Lots of questions about the vaccine. So what I want to commit to you as your college president is that the executive team and I on Wednesday at our meeting will identify some dates, working with your faculty leadership and classified Senate leadership, and identify listening sessions to hear more about your concerns, share what we know, grapple with where we don't have answers. Maybe we begin to try to strategize solutions to bring to bear and elevate for consideration. It would be my honor to not only have those conversations, but to be able to be the solutions to the problems where that is possible. These are no doubt complex issues that we're dealing with. And as I've even seen in the chat, we're not going to necessarily agree on every decision or every approach or every direction. But what we will do is hear each other out, try to understand the concerns and how it impacts every single member of our community and how we will respond to that responsibly. So with that being said, professional development will be where we engage a lot of conversation. Trauma-informed care for all of our constituency groups is being teed up right now with Dr. Tiffany Mims and many others from other communities, so we can understand it through different lenses. It will resonate differently based on our lived experiences. And so that will begin in September as we move into our Mental Health Awareness Month and some of the challenges not only that we bear trying to do our jobs in this environment, and the decisions and the ambiguity and our students' return and our return, or our concern around return as outlined in the chat very clearly and very directly. I look forward to serving all of you and engaging all of you throughout the rest of this academic year on this reopening strategy and our goals. It will take all of us to come together to identify how that is going to work successfully. And I am committed to ensuring we create those spaces. And if you have ideas, many of you that have engaged me and know me, please put forward those ideas. Please reach out to me, work with your leadership. Let's make sure that we are moving together and coming up with the best solutions possible for our community. So with that being said, I know there is a lot of activity that's going to happen in this afternoon. And I know there are a lot of questions. So as we did with Beavers Build Better Together and maintain a Q&A kind of stream online so you can get questions answered that aren't answered live, we will continue to do that. There are answers and there are questions about vaccinations, no doubt, returning, no doubt, impact on DI populations and communities, or those that have existing health conditions, or those that have religious beliefs or values that don't align with the direction that has been elected. We'll be talking through all of those things. I think the other thing that we will need to come together and understand is how are we going to address onboarding in a way that allows us all to move in the same direction, and understand the same values, no matter when we were hired. How do we retool people that have been here for a really long time and make sure that the world isn't moving past them? How do we leverage those same people's expertise and historical knowledge and experience to not stumble in the same ways we have historically or prevail in ways we have historically? So it's a time of reinvention for us at American River College. And again, as I started Convocation, there's no other group of individuals that I would want to do this re-envisioning with, this reimagining with, this recommitting to our community and our students. So thank you all for your time, your engagement. It's been a long morning. You have a lot more rich conversation to happen in your area meetings. We will continue to put this information out there. All of the questions posed that have not been responded to, we will respond to as we have publicly on the website over spring semester. We will continue that trend of transparency, open lines of communication. And I don't claim to believe that open lines of communication means that we're going to arrive at the same spot or believe the same things. But what I do believe is we owe each other the grace, the respect to listen to each other and hear the ideas and make the best decision for us. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for your engagement today, your ideas, your sharing, your critiques. And I look forward to the work that we have ahead with no doubt that it will be difficult, but we certainly have persevered thus far, and I have no doubt we will do so for the moving forward. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day. And with everyone, please say greetings to your fellow colleagues as you're leaving this meeting, and we will place this recording up, and go Beavs. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much for your attention, engagement, and ideas. I'm excited to have you back. Those of you that are on the ground, I look forward to seeing you on campus. For those of you that will transition as we move towards spring, I'm excited to greet you back. Have an awesome day. Share any ideas or concerns you have, and know that we will follow up with the questions. And we are Beaver believers, and I'm so proud to be working with all of you. Enjoy, and happy fall 2021 convocation.